What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast.
Episode 18, we're doing Lord of the Rings! We're going to Middle Earth. What's up? What's up, Frodo? How you doing? Very excited.
We're going to talk about easily one of the greatest franchises ever made.
One of the best trilogies of all time.
Yeah,
like up there with like The Godfather, The Dark Knight. It's up there.
It's actually the only trilogy with all of its movies put in the AFI Top 100 Movies of All Time list.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And it's one of the rare trilogies where like each sequel is like, if not equal to, better than the predecessor.
Yeah, every one of them is great.
Which is rare. Like you see that with like the Bourne series, like each one of those is better than the previous ones. The Godfather, obviously the first is best, but it's rare when even just if they're all very good movies. Like,
Yeah.
This doesn't happen very often with trilogies and franchises.
Each one got nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's one of the greatest stories ever told.
Yeah, and the last one cleaned up shop.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about this episode. And real quick, if you like our podcast and our fans, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. The best way to help us out is to share us with your friends. We know you got some movie friends out there. Let them know about this show. We're pretty new. We're only 18 episodes in. We have no marketing team. It's just me. Leo does all the editing. And leaving those 5-star reviews helps so much. A ton of people have been doing it, especially the written ones. I know every podcast says this, but it really does help us get seen. We're starting to rank in a lot of awesome charts in like top 50 TV and film categories. So it's very exciting stuff. You guys are really helping us out get seen. So thank you so much, but keep doing it. Keep sharing us.
Yeah, we love you guys.
Keep sharing us. Remember, new episodes every Monday and Thursday, plus clips every day. Anyways, let's get started.
Yeah, man.
Going to Middle Earth. And yeah, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest trilogies ever made. One of my favorite things about this movie, we watched The Two Towers last night just to kind of catch up because we hadn't seen it in a while, even though we've seen these like 20 times a piece. I forgot that it was shot on film. I wish Peter Jackson was still shooting on film.
Shot on location. Most of the time, or in a soundstage where they actually built the entire set.
Real landscapes. Yeah. I mean, shooting all over New Zealand. I mean, it shows clearly why The Hobbit didn't succeed as much as The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Not that it didn't make a ton of money, but in terms of like being epic movies that will live on forever.
The Hobbit it felt like a video game half the time. It didn't, the special effects, I mean, they were great, but it just didn't have that believability and the tangibility of actually shooting in person in the locations that the Lord of the Rings trilogy had. Yeah,
and even some of the sets are very simple, like the Two Towers where Theoden the King, his little castle isn't huge, and there's like a little village on top of that mountain, but it's very simple, practical things that they built. They built those. Yeah, it just adds so much to the filmmaking and like the aesthetic and the cinematography.
Yeah, it makes it feel believable and real. Like just having the actors walk into the sets and just the houses are barely used, but just having Aragorn walk past one of the houses with the people in the background, it makes it feel like it's a real place.
It's just so much better than The Hobbit. Not that The Hobbits are they're not horrible movies, but like I'm probably never gonna see them again, to be honest.
They turned a 200-page book into 3 movies, so.
But I can't believe that they released all of these movies in back-to-back years, starting in 2001, then 2002, 2003. What they did was they filmed all of them together.
Yeah, they filmed them simultaneously. People think that they filmed the last 2 together, but they actually filmed all 3 movies simultaneously, and they actually finished most of the principal photography before 2000.
Yeah, and it's 1999. They started production on October 11th in New Zealand, obviously. New Zealand. Hey, how you doing? All our New Zealand fans, what up?
Hey,
what
New Zealand,
up?
We love you.
It took a total of 438 days of continuous filming to complete all 3 movies, with additional reshoots and fill-in scenes to be shot afterwards.
All movies have that.
And yeah, all 3 movies were filmed together as a block, with scenes being shot as cast and locations became available rather than the order they're shown in the films. And Jackson made sure that every film got 1 year in post-production so that he could cut each one without a massive stress load. And he hired a different editor for each film so that none of the editors were overworked on the films.
And it was actually originally pitched as a 2-picture franchise. It didn't work out, so Jackson brought it to New Line, and New Line wanted it to be 3 films, and they gave them $300 million for a budget to shoot all 3 movies.
But it's seriously an impressive accomplishment, filmmaking-wise, to take on this grueling schedule of just continuous filming for a year and a half, and then to have the vision of what each movie will be like long term, with all these characters, all these story arcs, all connecting at the end. And I think one of the benefits of doing it for Peter Jackson was he wasn't really so much controlled by the studio, because let's say you're planning a trilogy and you make one, and maybe the studio sees it and they want you to do something differently for the next one. That's like, too bad, we already filmed them all, man. What do you want me to do? We already filmed it. So it's like complete control for Peter Jackson in the long haul and overall scheme of the trilogy.
100%. And what he did was absolutely impressive, and it was a heavy undertaking. I think very few people could have pulled it off the way he did. And like we said, he made 3 incredible films.
Yeah, and I think Peter Jackson's passion is what helps this series succeed so well. You can tell that Lord of the Rings is very near and dear to his heart, and it looks to me every time I watch one of the movies that he poured his entire heart into the film, in each one of them.
And it shows people are really interested in the fantasy genre, and this was actually the first fantasy film that was nominated and then won the Best Picture Oscar. The Academy has always been a little iffy with fantasy. It hasn't had as much respect. Same thing as with comedy or as horror. It's hard to get an Oscar nomination. So he actually brought such great critical acclaim to that genre where it changed people's minds about what a fantasy film could be.
Yeah, I mean, people are drawn to these ancient worlds of, soldiers fighting with swords and castles and kings and queens and even fantastical mythologies and magic, dragons, freaking demons, the little monsters in caves. And these worlds and stories are fascinating. They're romantic. They're exciting. Obviously, many of these stories and films that you'll see, they aren't well written or well made, but we get outliers like Lord of the Rings. And the influence of Lord of the Rings is still evident today. I mean, look at Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Clearly heavily influenced by Lord of the Rings.
And they quenched that appetite since Lord of the Rings was gone.
Wildly popular, absurdly popular TV show.
And so I'm curious to see what the next medieval-ish fantasy franchise is going to be. Amazon's doing a prequel to Lord of the Rings. When Sauron gained power and was defeated originally, so that's going to be the Amazon series.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm curious to see that.
I'll be excited to see it. I'll give it a shot. I'll take a peek.
We'll see.
Again, there's way too much stuff coming out, so it's hard to get a viewing of all this stuff anyways.
But I think one of the reasons why Lord of the Rings works so well is its themes are incredible and they resonate so well. I would say the main theme of Lord of the Rings is power, because I feel like the ring represents the thirst for power and how seeking out power can lead to destruction of oneself and of the world. And like the search for power can lead to the suffering of many.
Yeah, that's a major theme for sure, but also the theme of goodness.
Yeah.
And I mean, the hobbits are just pure innocent creatures, which is why they're the only ones, why Frodo's given the task of bringing the ring to Mount Doom, because he's the only being in Middle Earth that can accomplish that journey, who won't get corrupted by the evil of the ring and the power of the ring. So I think it's just a constant theme of back and forth of good versus evil, power versus innocence, purity versus hatred.
Versus darkness.
Yeah, dark versus light. Yeah. It's like an epic metaphor of dark versus light.
Absolutely. Do you want to go through the characters, just the main characters?
Before that, I want to say one more thing, that Howard Shore's film scores to this trilogy, nothing short of brilliant. Some of the best film music you'll ever hear. His music is so unique and memorable, and it fit perfectly with the story and the characters. And if you need a good workout song to get amped up, put on Fields of Pelennor from The Return of the King, and tell me you aren't ready to run through a brick wall. Put that on.
That amps me up.
Oh Absolutely. My God. If you need to like sprint or like do a heavy set.
I think his music in this is some of the best music ever made for films.
I'd put that.
Hands down.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into the characters, which are obviously the most important part of the story.
Yeah, let's start with Frodo.
Of course, the lead, the main character, played by the incomparable Elijah Wood, who we've seen in our neighborhood twice.
Yeah, apparently he lives in our neighborhood because we walked past him a couple of times.
Seems like a nice guy. He was with his baby strapped to his chest. But he had his sunglasses on so we couldn't see those gorgeous baby blues. But obviously Frodo's a hobbit from the Shire who inherits the one true ring from his uncle, or technically second cousin, leading him on a dangerous quest to save Middle-earth.
Yeah, and like you said, he represents innocence, like the best of us, purity, good-heartedness, loyal. He's pure of heart, and that's why he's given this task, because of every creature on Earth, this small, seemingly insignificant hobbit is the one being who can handle this undertaking.
Exactly. He's the nephew of the infamous Bilbo Baggins, who basically, when the movie starts, you learn of Bilbo Baggins, and he seems to be like a celebrity of the Shire. He's very famous for his legendary adventures. And Frodo, you can tell he has an inkling towards wanting to also leave the Shire and also go on adventures, and he admires Bilbo very much.
Yeah.
And Bilbo eventually, when he leaves and departs on his end of his life journey, he leaves his home and the ring to Frodo.
Yeah, and it's actually in the books they don't touch on this in the films, but in the books Frodo actually holds on to the ring for 17 years. So by the time the story starts taking off when he leaves the Shire, he's actually middle-aged. But because the ring keeps him youthful, he still looks like he's like 21.
Interesting.
Which is actually why Samwise calls him Mr. Frodo. So he calls him Mr. Frodo because Frodo was an adult when Sam was a little kid. So he's always known him as a kid. And so when Sam grows up and he's an adult, Frodo still looks the same, but Frodo is like 50 years old. So that's why Sam always calls him Mr. Frodo.
Frodo, like you said, is a very good being, and no matter how difficult his journey gets, he keeps pushing forward, keeps moving on because he knows that it's the right thing to do. You know, the heroism of Frodo is determination, steadfast adherence to what he believes is right and doing what's right. And he knows that his journey is just and necessary, and he believes in it very much.
And Gandalf believes in him. Let's move on to Gandalf.
Gandalf!
I would say Gandalf is probably a fan favorite of the franchise.
Yeah, he's probably the most iconic character. Probably the most beloved character, if not iconic.
And Ian McKellen, he exudes like this fatherly quality to Gandalf. You can tell he's wise beyond his years. Nobody knows how old he is. He's like thousands of years old, but he's selfless and kind and experienced, and he believes in the good in people, and he believes in the good in Frodo. That's why he sets him upon this task to bring the ring to Mordor.
Yeah, played by Sir Ian McKellen, one of his best roles. We'll remember this guy forever for this role. Gandalf the Grey is one of 5 wizards called Istarians, some of Tolkien's writing, sent to Middle-earth to help its inhabitants fight Sauron. Before the ring, to Frodo, Gandalf is simply like a very good friend of Bilbo's and of the Shire. He comes to visit now and then, and I think, you know, Frodo knows that Bilbo has been on journeys with Gandalf before, and he puts on the fireworks show for the Shire, and everyone there loves him, and he has kind of a friendly relationship with Frodo, but he doesn't know him as well as Bilbo knows him. He's a very gentle person and familiar, but he's also very powerful and very wise. And the thing with Gandalf, throughout the whole series in the franchise, he grows in strength and grows in power each obstacle he faces. He's constantly battling something powerful, constantly accomplishing these impossible goals, and each one makes him stronger and a more powerful wizard.
Yeah, he goes through a real transformation throughout the 3 films. But a really fun fact about the role of Gandalf is that Peter Jackson originally wanted Sean Connery to play Gandalf. Sean Connery didn't understand the story, so he turned it down.
It would have been weird to have Sean Connery.
Would have been a very different Gandalf.
You shall not pass.
You shall not pass.
I'm sure he would have pulled it off fine.
Yeah, but I feel like I'm not sure Sean could have pulled off like that kindness and just that. The audience just can't help but love Ian McKellen. No matter
he brings
what he does.
a warmth to the character.
Every
that,
character
you don't think anyone could have done.
Yeah, so I don't think it would have been the same with Sean Connery. He wouldn't have been as lovable.
I mean, it's almost as funny as the casting potential of the next character, Aragorn.
Yeah.
Played by Viggo Mortensen, who was almost played by Nick Cage.
Yeah.
Imagine if Lord of the Rings had Nicolas Cage as Aragorn instead of Viggo Mortensen.
It's insane. Peter Jackson originally offered the role to Nick Cage, who turned it down because of family reasons or scheduling conflicts, but it would have been a very different performance. And I love Nick Cage, but there's a difference between Nick Cage and Viggo Mortensen. And just like Sean Connery playing Gandalf, it wouldn't have had that gravitas or that power that Viggo brings to Aragorn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Nick Cage is a great actor.
Yeah.
Like, I know he's in some bad movies, and he's got to pay his bills because he has castles and helicopters and stuff, so he takes on a bunch of crappy movies, but the guy is very talented.
Yeah.
He's in some great movies, but he's more prone and more fit for, like, eccentric characters. I don't think Aragorn would have fit him at all. It would have been weird, especially with, like, Viggo brings, like, this amazing quality to Aragorn and, like, otherworldly, and he brings the feeling of the character destined to be a king one day. He brings that honor to the role and nobility to the role that you think Nick Cage probably wouldn't have been able to pull off.
And Viggo was actually cast while the film was in production. They cast a different actor to play Aragorn. He was only 24 or 25, and he actually shot for 4 days as Aragorn. And then Peter Jackson fired him because he realized he was too young and he needed someone older to play Aragorn. So then in the last second, they connected with Viggo Mortensen, whose son was a big fan of the books. So he convinced Viggo, his father, to take the role. And then Viggo Mortensen got the book, flew to New Zealand and read the book on the flight to New Zealand. And then the next day, he shot the scene where he fights the wraiths on top of that mountain.
That's insane.
To defend the hobbits. That was his first day of shooting.
Talk about a death wish that guy probably has for Peter Jackson. My God. And then he watches all these movies become so successful in like Viggo Mortensen's career. Holy crap. But I mean, it was right for the movie. It
worked out.
And real quick, Aragorn is introduced in Fellowship as this mysterious wanderer.
Strider.
Named Strider, yeah. And you eventually learn that he's Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, who cut the ring from the hand of Sauron, which means he's heir to the throne of Gondor.
Yeah. And
again, Aragorn's destined to become king. And honestly, in the history of cinema and fiction literature, Aragorn is one of like the most honorable leaders and warriors I've personally ever seen.
Yeah.
The guy is amazing. I love his character so much. He's my favorite probably in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
He always makes the best choice and the best decision. Jon Snow reminds me of him. I feel like Jon Snow was based off of him. Same kind of thing. They always make the honorable decision. They'll always sacrifice themselves for the good of the others. Like when at the Battle for Rohan, at Helm's Deep, he's like, let's just ride out and fuck it. Let's just die fighting. You know what I mean?
Instead of escaping, he'll die and fight with the men, even though it's like...
It's not even his kingdom.
It's like 100 men versus a 10,000 army.
It's like, by then, it was like 10 guys. Versus the whole army. So he believes in honor and he believes in justice and he's probably one of the strongest characters in fiction that there is.
And Viggo is such an interesting guy. He's such a great actor. He's trilingual, fluently in English, Spanish, and Danish, but he also speaks French.
He learned a Middle Eastern language for Hidalgo.
Italian, Norwegian, Swedish, so he's a super intelligent guy. He's kind of like this unique global citizen of the world. And he's perfect for Aragorn.
Yeah, I feel like he's the modern version of Aragorn. And even when he got to set, everyone noticed that he was he had like ancient literature and poetry that he was reading in different languages.
Yeah,
they're like, okay, you're perfect.
He's literally Aragorn. Let's move on to one of the most important characters in the entire trilogy, Sam, played by Sean Astin. Sam is a normal hobbit just like Frodo, but has, again, like Frodo, a strong desire to be more than a hobbit, and which he brings up multiple times when he constantly talks about how he wants to meet elves and
how he wants to be remembered.
Yeah, and his lack of hesitation to follow Frodo on his quest is just a testament to his character.
Sam is endlessly loyal to Frodo, and he's the greatest friend you can imagine. I think his love for Frodo is the reason why he's never even tempted once to take the ring, because he knows that it's Frodo's job and he's there to serve him in whatever way he can to help him accomplish it.
It reminds me of Horcruxes too, like the ring and its effect on people, and how although in Deathly Hallows the trio, they split time with it, Frodo keeps the ring for himself at all times because it's his vocation. And, whereas Frodo has a path or vocation and a journey laid out for him, Sam just joins the journey out of his strong character.
And Frodo was told by Galadriel, Cate Blanchett's character, that he is the one who has to bear the burden, no one else, because he's the only one who's capable of bringing it all the way to Mount Doom.
Yeah, and Sam's loyalty, like you said, never changes. He never gives up on Frodo. He never stops supporting him, even when Frodo abandons him towards the end of the trilogy. And Sam plays a vital role in representing the ordinary world. Samwise represents the pleasures of life and being a hobbit and stress-free world and just living your life in happiness. And according to Tolkien, without the simple and ordinary, the noble and heroic is meaningless. So you need Samwise to understand the gravity of the journey and what they must do.
And he ultimately becomes arguably the true hero of the story when he carries, I almost said Elijah Wood, when he carries Frodo up the mountain and into the volcano.
He couldn't do it without him.
He couldn't do it without him.
Although Frodo is, like you said, the one creature who can take the ring to Mount Doom, he could never accomplish his journey or even finish it without Sam by his side.
Yeah.
Sam literally carries him to the lava pit, and he's literally the one that has to stop Gollum. And once Frodo turns, like Frodo gets there, but he turns at some point. But Samwise is one of the most vital characters to the story.
Do you want to talk about that real quick, about how he turns?
How we should save it.
All right, we'll save it.
Save it for the end of the.
All right, we'll save it.
We're gonna go movie by movie by movie.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to one of my favorite characters, Legolas.
So hot.
Easily the best character to play with in the Lord of the Rings video game.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
With the arrows, it's like you could just destroy people
and
from
the
a
dual
distance.
swords.
Yeah, the 2 swords is badass. Whenever we played it, I always tried to be Legolas. But it was actually Orlando Bloom's first ever job. As
he
an
was still in
actor.
acting school, right?
He was still in drama school when he got the role.
It's insane.
And he tried out for Faramir, but they liked him so much that they gave him Legolas instead.
What a career this guy had in the 2000s.
He was doing Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean at the same time.
Insane.
It's crazy.
2 biggest movie franchises of the 2000s probably, besides Harry Potter.
Easily.
Like, insane.
Yeah.
Legolas is an elf from Mirkwood, and he's an expert with his bow. He's light on his feet. He has a bunch of special skills that elves have, including immortality, so long as you don't die in battle.
He can see like hundreds of miles ahead in the distance.
Yeah, vast distances. He has an excellent ear, so he's an amazing fighter and also a very loyal friend, which you can tell because him and Gimli, who plays the dwarf, their cultures and their civilizations have had past wars, and they start off with this like stubborn banter back and forth, but they become very good friends throughout the course of the trilogy.
Yeah, and their banter is one of the best comedic elements of the franchise, especially when they're counting kills during battles.
So funny.
21, 22.
Every time it's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
And then when I love when Legolas shoots down the entire mammoth full of men, and he kills all those guys, and then Gimli's like, it still counts as one.
It's great. And Legolas is a fantastic character because it shows that the different species of beings in Middle Earth and how they've been friends and they've been enemies in the past, but for this giant undertaking, they have to unite together in order to stop it.
We'll move on to Gimli real quick, played by John Rhys Davis, who's great as Gimli the Dwarf, and ironically, he's the tallest actor in the Fellowship of the Ring. He's 6'1", he's the tallest out of all of them, and they did a great job. Same thing with the Hobbits and the actors who play the Hobbits, making them seem small compared to normal-sized actors or even taller actors. Just a bunch of camera tricks. Also,
forced perspective.
Using large sets with normal-sized people and just different villains and body doubles and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a scene in the Two Towers when Frodo and Sam are captured and they're sitting in a room and there are a bunch of wooden barrels in the room. But they obviously made the barrels gigantic, like 10 feet tall, because they're standing next to these barrels and they look tiny compared to them.
Yeah, but on camera, it just looks like they're tiny beings.
Yeah, exactly.
And they did an amazing job with it. And he's a fan favorite, Gimli, among like hardcore Lord of the Ring fans. People love Gimli.
He's the funniest by far.
Yeah,
he's the comic relief.
Impossibly stubborn, easily insulted, very honorable, noble though, and brave. And let's move on to a very important character, and probably not the most favorite character, probably the most iconic character, Gollum and Smeagol, played by the amazing and probably most underrated actor in the film industry, Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
And he might be the most fascinating character in the franchise.
He's easily the most complex character.
For sure.
Because not only is his past and his transition into Gollum fascinating, but Gollum he suffers from a split personality disorder. And Smeagol, there's 2 facets to his personality. There's Smeagol, then there's Gollum, and Gollum is the ring's representation of him. And it's amazing in the Two Towers where you can see these 2 facets to his personality colliding and conflicting.
Yeah, and they both gain power at different periods of time over Gollum's body and entity. And we'll talk about later on what causes the power shifts between Gollum and Smeagol with Gollum the character.
Yeah, and then this gave birth to the widespread use of motion capture, and Jackson, in working with Andy Serkis, pretty much built this technology from the ground up.
Yeah, Andy Serkis is a large part in laying the groundwork for modern day motion graphics capturing, and his motion capture studio, the Imaginarium, started with Planet of the Apes and the remakes, and they also did the motion capture effects for the Avengers films and the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh, wow, he's killing.
So they started the company. He's one of the co-founders in 2011, and so they've done all the work on those movies, which are the biggest movies every year.
Wow, that's super cool.
So, and he's got some more movies in the works, but it's amazing to see such a talented guy create something so important to film and revolutionize filmmaking, like, with the help of, obviously, great filmmakers like Peter Jackson and collaborators.
And if you look at behind-the-scenes photos of the first film, because he's in it for a little bit, but especially the second film, he's wearing these goofy outfits, but they don't even have the balls on the outfits yet. They don't even have targets on any of his limbs yet. So they were like discovering how to utilize the technology as they were going.
Yeah, he didn't even have dots on his face or nothing.
He just wore a white suit pretty much the whole time.
And then you see like Paul Rudd, or you see like Josh Brolin doing Thanos, and he's covered in dots.
Yeah,
and it's just like how advanced they've come.
And they even have like now they have a camera on. The actors wear a helmet with a camera that points right at their face, like a few inches away from their face, to really record their movements. So you can see how through trial and error of making these films and a few others, they really perfected the technology.
Plus, I'm pretty sure Josh Brolin did most of his scenes as Thanos just by himself in the studio. Like
really?
same thing. Well, a lot of them, and same thing with Mark Ruffalo as Hulk. He did a lot of his scenes in the studio by himself.
I believe that, yeah, because
kind of like Benedict Cumberbatch as the dragon in Hobbit. But Andy Serkis, again, one of the most underrated actors, filmmakers out there. He's an amazing guy, and how he's never been nominated for like an Oscar or anything, it's just it's a damn shame.
It's nuts. And I love seeing him when he's actually in a live action role. It's great to see him.
Yeah,
see his
like
face.
in The Prestige, he's so cool.
Yeah,
and then he's awesome in Black Panther, dude.
Yeah.
He's so cool, and he's very committed to acting when he has a role.
What's cool about Gollum, and actually a lot of the characters in the story that we don't learn in the films, are a lot of these characters are very, very old. Gollum is over 500 years old. Gandalf is thousands of years old. But even Aragorn, he's like in his 80s. Because he's part of this bloodline that goes back to ancient history where they live extremely long lives. So he's like close to 100 in the film. The hobbits live to 100 years old, but and Frodo is at least 50 years old. So and Legolas is actually, I think, thousands of years old too.
Yeah, because again, elves only die when they die in battle.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to think that all these characters have been living for centuries.
And they're all played by 20-year-olds.
Yeah. But it's a facet that we don't really understand in the films.
Yeah. And some other important characters in the film include Merry Pippin, the two other hobbits on the journey who follow throughout the trilogy.
Yeah.
And there are other characters who are only like in smaller scenes, like one movie.
And I mean, we got the two other main villains, Sauron and Saruman. And then Sauron's a great villain. I mean, we only see him in the intro of Lord of the Rings, but he's terrifying. It's kind of like Voldemort before he comes into power again. It's just the thought and just the idea of speaking about Sauron is dangerous, and only his eye is he only has his eye right now, but just the idea of him getting his form back is truly horrifying, and it really would bring about the end of the world.
Yeah. Sir Christopher Lee as Saruman, fantastic villain. I feel like his character, because there's so many amazing parts of these movies and so many great characters, like Christopher Lee is just kind of like hidden in the movie, even though he's just a fantastic villain. And he was also he was the only member of the cast to actually meet J.R.R. Tolkien in real life.
Fan.
Yeah. And so he also read Lord of the Rings every year of his life until the day he died. And he's just a phenomenal actor, and he did a great job as Saruman in these movies.
He actually he was also a death metal singer.
Was he really?
Yeah,
in real life?
Even before his death.
Oh my god!
As an old man, he was in a death metal band.
That's crazy. I think he passed away in 2015.
Yeah, it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, great actor.
Yeah, but he did a great job as Saruman.
All right, shall we move on to the filmography and go movie by movie?
Let's get into
and
it.
Do
man.
this.
Let's
All
dig
right,
deep.
Let's get into it with The Fellowship of the Ring, which came out in 2001. And I remember when we went to the movie theaters to see this, but like a few weeks before, like we saw trailers and everything, but I had no idea what Lord of the Rings was.
Yeah.
I didn't know what these trailers were, all the props and stuff they had, and like the posters and stuff, but it looked cool. And I remember Dad took us to see it, which is because parents of divorce, the dad takes kids out to the movies every Saturday night. So I remember him taking us to the movies to see Lord of the Rings one Saturday night, and I freaking loved it.
Yeah, it was great. It was amazing. I've never seen anything like it before. And I think what was so strong about it is that it utilized all these emerging technologies in filmmaking, where you had special effects, you had the ability to really blend CGI with miniatures. So Peter Jackson was able to create this incredible world that looked real and tangible and believable.
And the most important part about creating this world, besides the CGI and the actors and everything, is this is the first film in a very large story that most people have never heard of.
Yeah.
Like I said, I never heard of Lord of the Rings. I never heard of Tolkien. Obviously, I was a kid, but still, I knew Harry Potter, so it wasn't super popular mainstream audiences at the time. So not only do you have to technically make an effective trilogy in movies in terms of the script, directing, acting, wardrobe, sets, etc., you have to introduce a whole new world of mythology, creatures, habitats, landscapes to generally ignorant movie-going public.
Yeah.
And they did an amazing job with the exposition of this film, you know, with the intro credits, with the elf talking and going over the rings and everything, how the men got the rings, the elves got the rings and everything. But it was really effective, and they show exposition throughout the series.
There are characters that give us exposition throughout the films, but we're always up to speed with what's happening. I mean, I don't think I've heard of anyone being confused during the movies.
For sure.
But because it was such a unknown property, the studios they originally went to thought it was unfilmable, so that's why they passed on it. But little did they know it would be one of the most beloved franchises ever.
And I think it's because Peter Jackson just understood the characters and the story and how amazing it all was. And I'm sure he had this vision in his head for decades of always wanting to make a movie series of Lord of the Rings. Or at least he wanted to see that at some point in his life. And, you know, there's a lot of fantasy franchises that, like, failed in the 80s. There were some good ones in the 90s. Like, Neverending Story is, like, this great, epic, fantastical franchise. And so just to bring Lord of the Rings into that landscape of cinema and bring it to audiences around the world, I'm sure it was a daunting task, but he did an amazing job.
Especially when you consider that the first film, the first 40 minutes is like, there's not much action going on, which is why I think it was really smart to use the ancient war from thousands of years ago and the defeat of Sauron to open up the movie, because that really brought us into, oh my God, this is incredible action and special effects, and these villains are terrifying. And so after that happens, we got 40 minutes of setup, which can be a little boring, but is great when you learn to love the characters and you look at the sets of the Shire and the wardrobe, and it just, like, it brings you into the world. Yeah,
the Shire at first, the first time you see it, it's like, oh, I want to, like, see all the swords and stuff, but, like, it's one of the best parts of the movie when you watch it over and over again.
And you have to fall in love with the Shire to understand what's at stake.
Yeah, and especially because the hobbits play the biggest role in the books, whereas they're kind of more of, like, supporting characters in the movie versions, which I understand that's what Peter Jackson had to do.
The books are actually told through all their perspectives.
Yeah. But the hobbits are, I think, the biggest characters in the books in terms of, like, time spent on their timelines and their storylines. But you gotta make an entertaining movie for American Universal Global audiences. You gotta get some swords in there, guy.
You gotta get Viggo's face in there.
Yeah, you need some amazing Viggo Mortensen face and close-ups because this movie is not short of amazing hair and beards. Like, so many good hair, so many good parts, like middle parts everywhere. Excellent, like 2-week shadow. It's great. It's full of it.
It's very masculine. But it's a great setup. He does a good job bringing us into the world and then teaching us about the ring. Gandalf investigates the ring, and that's when he comes back to Frodo to set him upon the task.
Yeah, so Bilbo gives him the ring, which Frodo inherits. And Frodo inherits much more than being able to become invisible. You know, this is the trick that Bilbo used to play, and this is the trick he did at the end of his big speech and his big celebration for when he's leaving the Shire and he disappears.
Yeah.
And sometimes I always wonder to myself, like, why does Bilbo leave the ring to Frodo knowing that it'll constantly bring him to the brink of death and not only danger but, like, mental deterioration? Because clearly Bilbo has been mentally affected by the ring, like, big time. And you can tell by, like, the scene that he snaps on Frodo is terrifying because he's such a warm, fun character. Then you see this horrible, evil monster hiding inside of him, trying to get out. As soon as he, like, asks to see the ring again after he gives it to Frodo.
I think him giving the ring to Frodo is him saving his soul.
Himself? His own soul?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Because I felt like he would have always been stuck in the darkness of the ring if he wasn't able to give it to Frodo.
Yeah, because Bilbo doesn't know what's about to happen to Frodo.
Yeah.
He has no idea.
He just wants to pass the burden on.
Yeah. And so basically, you know, once Frodo gets the ring and the home, and then, I almost said Dumbledore, then Gandalf sets him up on the quest to destroy the One Ring.
And then, but his investigation is what leads him to discuss it with Saruman, which gets Saruman to get on their tail about, he learns that they have the ring, which sets him on the pursuit of them. But then this forms the early stages of the gang. This forms the early stages of the gang where the 4 hobbits get together, and they're off on their little journey together.
Yeah, Merry and Pippin are so freaking funny in these movies. They're hysterical. Definitely, obviously, comic relief. But then they eventually grow as characters too, and they get separated later along the lines.
Yeah, they have very important roles to play. But right now they're very innocent. They're kind of fun to look at with their big feet, and they don't wear shoes.
They don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them really do until like the scenes when they're being chased by the ring wraiths.
Yeah,
and that's when shit starts to hit the fan.
And then they link up with Aragorn, who they know as Strider up to this point, and they're at that bar, and this the first time we actually see the power of the ring is when I keep almost calling him Elijah, is when Frodo orders the drinks at the bar, and then he slips. And the ring slips out of his pocket, and he goes to grab it, and there's this amazing shot where it follows the ring falling onto his finger, and then he disappears. But we see what he sees when he's wearing the ring, which is like this alternate dimension in which Sauron can see him, and it's an incredible reveal and a great moment to understand the power of this ring.
It brings you into the world of like what this ring is capable of, because when Bilbo disappears, you don't see what Bilbo sees, but now we understand what the ring is really like, and you can tell it's very cool, and it seems like an awesome trick, but also it seems very dark and seems evil.
Seems like an evil power.
Yeah, it's almost like he's in a nightmare, or like in like instead of like purgatory to get into heaven, he's in purgatory to get to hell or something like that.
Exactly.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah, and this brings them Aragorn to link up with them, and he hides them from the wraiths, who are terrifying villains. They've developed the scream of the wraiths by recording possums at night.
Really?
Yeah. Most of those possum screams.
And the wraiths, they're the ring wraiths, they're former kings, right?
Yeah, former kings. And now they serve Sauron, and their duty is to collect the ring.
It's kind of like Dementors.
But it has that great cross-cutting scene, just like in Silence of the Lambs. Same kind of thing where the wraiths show up at what we think is the Hobbit's hotel room, and it looks like they're sleeping in the bed, and the wraiths each go to one bed, and we see, and it cuts with each of the Hobbits sleeping in bed, just close-ups of their faces, and then the wraiths raise their swords and bring them down on the beds, and then it cuts to the Hobbits, and they're still peacefully sleeping in their hotel room, and they hear the screams of the wraiths, and then it cuts back to the wraiths, and they realize it was a trick and there's no one in the beds. So it's that great cut, same kind of thing they do in Silence of the Lambs, where you think that the villain is at a certain location where the protagonists are, but they actually aren't.
Yeah, so they escape the ring wraiths this time.
Yeah.
But next they continue their journey.
Oh, but first, before that happens, there's an iconic shot where they hide underneath that tree trunk, and this is the first time we see a wraith in person, and it gets off its horse, and you can see that it's just gigantic, and it's terrifying, and it's looking out everywhere for them, and the four of them are just hiding under there, terrified, and it's such an iconic image for the series to show the power that Sauron has behind his forces.
It's a great introduction to the ring wraiths, who we'll continuously see throughout the trilogy.
Yeah.
And so they escape the ring wraiths for now until they go and camp out on this cliffside, or this little ridge, and this is where the ring wraiths come to attack them again.
Yeah.
So Frodo wakes up from the middle of the night because his other Hobbit friends, they're Hobbits. They eat like 12 meals a day.
And they're
second
bonehead.
breakfast. Oh, he hasn't heard of second breakfast. So they have like 10 meals a day, and then he wakes up to them laughing and cooking, and they have a fire going, and Frodo realizes what they've done. They're being chased by these evil monsters, and they just lit a fire. So obviously they're going to be able to see it, and this is where the ring wraiths come to attack them. Aragorn comes to save them. However, Frodo gets stabbed by one of the ring wraiths, which isn't a normal wound. It's not a mortal wound, and if he doesn't get it treated, he'll become a ring wraith himself. So this is what leads Aragorn to having to bring him to the elves in Rivendell.
Before that, can I just interject? So that fight with Aragorn and the wraiths, that was the first bit of footage that Peter Jackson sent to the studio. I think it was the 5th day of shooting, and as a way to prove that the shoot was going well, he decided the footage I'm going to send them is this battle, so I hope it goes well. And it was Viggo's first day on set, like we said earlier. And so they shot it, got the dailies back the next day, and it looked fantastic. They sent it to the studio, and the studio was like, okay, keep going, guys. So it was a very important scene for the production as well.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on after this, Frodo is taken by Elf Arwen to Elven Haven of Rivendell. and where he's to be healed by her father, Elrond. And this is where Liv Tyler, I think this is one of my favorite roles of Liv Tyler. Probably my favorite role of Liv Tyler. She's phenomenal in this movie, and so badass to see this chase sequence of her with Frodo on the horse being chased by the ring wraiths on horse, and how close they are to catching him. And it's an awesome horse race, which you don't see very often anymore in like Hollywood or big movies. Just like these awesome horse races.
Now it's just Fast and Furious car chases.
And it's just so badass where she gets to her land and across that river, and then she has the river take them all out. It's a great scene. It's very tense.
It's the first sign of magic that we've seen.
And so now we're in Rivendell, where Frodo links up with Gandalf. So this is where we get the first parts of Aragorn and his past relationship and the building of the rest of his relationship with Arwen.
We learned that they have a long history, and Aragorn even speaks Elvish, so he's kind of part of that society in a way.
Yeah, but you can tell that we have this tension between Elrond and Aragorn because Elrond doesn't want his daughter to marry a man because that means that she won't go on to become immortal like the rest of the elves, and she'll pass that on to become mortal.
Yeah, he doesn't want her daughter to die.
Which is a back and forth exchange that we deal with throughout the rest of the film.
Yeah. And then Frodo meets with Bilbo. That's where he does that scary face thing. But it's pretty much a goodbye to Bilbo because Bilbo's aging quickly, and it seems as though he's going to die. Seems as though he's going to die pretty soon.
Yeah, he's aged a lot more quickly than the last time we saw him.
Yeah. But this is where the council meeting happens.
And this is where we get the team.
The fellowship.
This is where the fellowship
first of the original Avengers.
Yeah, because Elrond does not want the ring in Rivendell much longer. He wants it to be gone, and he wants them to continue their journey. And this is where that infamous fight and the big fight and screaming and yelling match happens between all the different creatures and the humans and the elves and the dwarves.
It's where we meet all the new characters.
Yeah. And then, of course, who speaks up but Frodo? He says that he'll take the ring to Mordor, to Mount Doom, to put it into the volcano to destroy it forever.
Proving again why he's the one who can do this.
Exactly. It's a perfect metaphor why Frodo has to be the one. He's the only creature in Middle-earth that can accomplish the mission. Yeah.
And then also probably the best thing that come out of the scene is the infamous Sean Bean meme. One does not simply walk the ring into Mordor. Probably the most used meme.
It's hilarious. Everyone knows what it is.
Yeah.
And so the fellowship consists of Frodo and the fellow hobbits, Merry, Sam, and Pippin. The two men, Aragorn and Boromir, played by Sean Bean. Legolas the elf, Gimli the dwarf, and Gandalf the squad.
Hell yeah. Squad up, kid. No B squad in this, except for maybe Merry and Pippin.
And so now we got our team assembled, Avengers assembled, we're ready to go, and now it begins the journey to Mordor, and which first leads them up the mountain. So Saruman's spies and his birds spot them climbing up the mountain, and they cause an avalanche.
Yeah, he causes intense weather to form, and so then it stops them from being able to continue on that route, so then they have to go through the forest, which is when they run into the elves. And which is when we learn through Kate Blanchett's character, Galadriel, that Frodo is the only being that can carry out this duty, and that it's going to be him alone. Even though he's with a group, it's going to come down to him.
I mean, and she gives him that eternal light.
Yeah, but he also gives her a chance to take the ring from him, and she passes the test.
And next we get to the best part of the movie, I think, is when we finally get to see some crazy action stuff going on. And we walk, and they make it to the Mines of Moria. I think it's probably my favorite part of the film.
It's the biggest set piece, yeah.
Because the way that Gimli talks it up, he's like, "Oh, I can't wait they'll welcome us with open arms. We'll have bowls of food. It'll be amazing. You'll see the might of the underground dwarf city and everything." And then when they get in, once Gandalf does that spell, and obviously they get past that evil
that water monster,
the thing in the lake. Yeah. And then it's empty. And there's just bones everywhere, and it's dark, and there's no one alive, and it's just like, where are all the dwarves, and where have they all gone? What happened to them all? And it's just, it brings this airy chill down your spine because you were expecting a warm welcome, you were expecting safety for all the characters, you're expecting a nice night in comfortable beds, but now they have darkness and death ahead of them.
And it shows that parts of Middle Earth have been overtaken by Sauron's army.
Yeah, maybe the characters didn't understand the extent of how quickly they were spreading throughout Middle Earth.
Yeah, there's no media and news to keep people informed.
There's no Twitter.
Yeah. But then this leads to that iconic fight in that giant room when I think it's Merry or Pippin knocks down that dead body
In the tombs?
Yeah, in the tombs.
He knocks down like the skeleton and it falls down.
And it crashes.
It's hilarious scene.
And then Gandalf's like, "You fool.
You fool." But I love the bucket crashes down, then like there's more bones falling down. It's just like this slow, loud crumble.
Yeah. But then after that you hear the shrieking and the roaring of the orcs, and you're like, "Oh fuck, what's gonna happen?" And then they know it's just a matter of time until they're overrun, so then they prepare for battle.
Did you know that this scene when they're discovering the tomb and everything, and before they knock everything down, Viggo Mortensen, Peter Jackson had to film only one side of his face because surfing was like a big hobby between the cast and crew, which they would like do on the weekends and stuff. And I guess Viggo had like a really bad wipeout, and he horribly bruised one side of his face, and it was like swollen, and it was so bad looking that makeup couldn't do anything about it. So that Peter Jackson's like, well, I'll just film one side of your face. So next time you watch that scene, and you'll see Aragorn's only filmed from one side.
I have to watch it again now after hearing that. That's crazy. But also, before we get to the fight, the Mines of Moria is where we're introduced to Gollum for the first time. He's just off in the distance, and Ian McKellen gives us a little backstory about him. So it's the first time we ever see him.
Yeah, I think he calls him one of the lake folk or something like that.
Yeah. Orcs and like evil elves come, and then
the troll.
That's the giant troll
scene.
comes.
So now we get to see what all these characters are capable of. We get to see how great of a fighter Aragorn is, even though we got a taste of it all already. We get to see Legolas in action. We get to see Gimli in action. Even Gandalf's getting his hands bloody. Yeah. And the Hobbits are holding their own too, which is always funny when you see the Hobbits fighting.
Yeah, it's like how do they even produce that much energy to like to fight someone full grown?
But it's a crazy epic scene, man. It really sets the tone for the rest of the battles.
And it really was a breakthrough for special effects in terms of the troll being used in a live action situation. It still looks good to this day. It still looks believable,
especially when you have a hobbit on its shoulders and like it's really an actor up there for half the shots.
And then so obviously they defeat this little group of villains, and then it comes down to the climax of the film where they get to that, I don't know where they are, this giant, huge, expansive room with just those columns, and then you can just hear this army just going after them.
And bows and arrows are starting to fly at them.
Yeah, so who knows how many orcs are after them. And then you hear the scream of the Balrog, and it scares away the army. And you're like, what the hell is this then? And then it begins that famous chase sequence of the Fellowship trying to escape the caverns, where this gigantic demon-like creature is chasing after them.
It's awesome. It's so badass. And this is where we get that iconic line from Gandalf as they're crossing that bridge, and he lets the Fellowship go ahead of him. And this is a very sad part of the film, because this is where Gandalf is going to sacrifice himself to save everybody else. And he gets that line, "You shall not pass," and it's badass.
Yeah,
and the bridge,
you can see the power that he has with this moment, because this giant demon-like creature, and he stopped it in its tracks.
Yeah, and then the bridge crumbles after the Fellowship passes, but Gandalf has to run back.
You think it's going to be okay.
You think he's going to make it, but he grabs onto the edge of the cliff, the cavern, but then right before he falls, he goes, "Run, you fools!" And then he falls down.
Fly, you fools.
And then it's very emotional because Frodo screams because he loves Gandalf. They all love Gandalf, and to watch one of they're basically their leader of the quest fall and to his death is a horrible thing to see for them. And it's obviously tough on all of them, and you see the effects of it once they escape the cavern and escape the caves.
But they don't even have time to mourn. They're there for a moment, but then Aragorn's like, "We gotta get going. Like, we have to go." They don't even have a second to take a breath.
Yeah, it's not until they're out of the cave when they're just all like, "I can't believe what just happened."
Yeah. And then this leads to the final battle. They take the boats up the river, and then when they make camp, this is when Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo.
Exactly. Showing why Frodo, again, is the only creature who can take it, because even Boromir, who's a great man and a great warrior and seems like a noble, loyal person, gets corrupted by the ring.
Yeah, and he gets he attacks Frodo and tries to steal it from him under the false pretense that he's just trying to help him, but like all the others before who took the ring, they took it out of their desire for power.
Yeah, and then and then Boromir realizes what he's done.
Yeah.
And tries to redeem himself, which he does by fighting off the orcs and sacrificing himself for the Hobbit Frodo to get away.
Yeah, Boromir's death was tragic because he attacked Frodo, but then he offered himself up in defense of them to help them get away. And then watching, like, he just gets hit with arrow after arrow after arrow, and he's just still standing. He's like, "Go at me, bro!"
He's got like 3 arrows in his chest.
But what happens is, like, there's that one orc who's like the leader, and he's got that handprint on his face, and
Lurtz.
He's the biggest and the baddest one. And you see him throughout the film, especially when Saruman is building the army, and you see him born. You can just tell, even among all these monstrous orcs, he's the alpha among them. He's absolutely terrifying. And then he just goes up to Boromir with his longbow and just like, he's like point blank range, just shoots a fucking arrow at him. It's insane.
It's a little excessive.
Yeah, it was terrifying. It was awful.
But Sean Bean, the guy has died so many times in movies.
So many deaths.
He's died 23 times on screen, so 21 times in movies. And he's actually at the point in his career that he's refusing and turning down roles where the character he would play dies because he can't take it anymore.
I bet.
I don't blame him. He like hasn't died in like 7 movies. That's it. That's 7 things that he hasn't died in.
Yeah, The Martian and like...
And I think he knows, like, I don't want to be in a movie where I die because everyone's going to be like, oh, Sean Bean's in this.
Yeah,
obviously, the character's going to die.
Yeah.
But obviously, he's been blessed with an amazing career.
Yeah.
But still, it's a tough blow to the Fellowship because Boromir was another great warrior for them and protector of the weaker of the group of the hobbits and everything.
And then this is when the Fellowship gets split up into 3 factions because in the battle, Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, they're going to town on all these orcs, but there's just too many. They're overrun. And without knowing it, Merry and Pippin get kidnapped by them because the orcs think that these 2 hobbits are the ones with the ring. And then while that's happening, Frodo and Sam manage to escape by boat on the river. And then after that, the trio, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, they kill all the guys in their area, and they have to decide what they're going to do from now on because they see that both pairs of hobbits have split up. They obviously know that Frodo is carrying out his quest, and they know where he's going, and they don't feel like they can help them on their quest. So they decide the best thing to do is to track down Merry and Pippin and try and save them.
Which is probably the most noble thing to do.
Yeah, and it sets up the second film.
Yeah. And so this movie is fantastic. It's the great introduction to the world, to the story. One of the best parts of it is there's so many like effective villains in this movie too.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Sauron, Nazgul, Saruman, Watcher in the Water, the Cave Troll, Balrog, and Lurtz.
Yeah.
Tons of
Crazy.
villains to match like all the interesting characters. So it's fun to have like a story with so many obstacles that they have to overcome.
Yeah.
And how like they're constantly being there's all these battles that they have to go through. It's entertaining as hell.
Yeah.
And it really makes you feel more empathy for the characters.
Oh, yeah. And then it's such a great ending, especially with the emotional climax of Boromir's death. And then you think when you watch this film for the first time, you think the Fellowship of the Ring, it's going to be this group, the entire trilogy. But watching them get split up, you understand this is not going to be an easy task by any means for any of them. And there are real challenges ahead. And it's only just beginning. It's going to get harder from here on out.
Now we see the weight of the journey that the ring poses.
Well said. So before we move on to Two Towers, I wanted to give some fun trivia about Fellowship of the Ring. Jake Gyllenhaal auditioned for the role of Frodo, and he was so bad that he was almost laughed out of the audition. And the worst part about it was he did an American accent, not knowing that it had to be a British accent. And so then, after he was doing an American accent, Peter Jackson stopped him and was like, "You have to do an English accent for this." And he had not prepared one, so he was fumbling through an English accent, and he said it was the worst audition of his life.
And he wasn't super famous yet.
Yeah, I think he had just done Donnie Darko, and that's it. Sean Bean is terrified of heights, and so a lot of this film takes place on high mountaintops that required helicopters to take the actors up to these incredibly high spots. And since he was horrified of going in the helicopter, he opted instead to spend 2 hours hiking up these mountains before shooting each day.
In wardrobe.
In wardrobe.
So they would fly up, the crew and casting crew would fly up in helicopters, and they'd see Sean Bean in wardrobe as Boromir hiking up the mountain every day.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, which is in terms of action the best of the three probably. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Especially the Battle of Helm's Deep.
It's high octane, man.
And the opening of this film is literally nothing short of epic because it opens with the Battle of Balrog. And, you know, when the last film ends, when Fellowship ends, again, Gandalf sacrificed himself, and you think he's dead. And then you get to see that he actually went on this crazy journey.
Yeah.
And so they show
incredible battle.
They show when he falls down with Balrog and how he just starts fighting him midair while they're falling with his sword. It's like, what the fuck? This is crazy. Never seen anything like this in my life.
Cut right into the action.
And he's like, the great thing about Gandalf, he's not afraid of anything.
Yeah.
He just knowingly fell to his death. And even though he thinks he's going to die and probably will die, he's just beating the shit out of this demon with a sword.
He's like, fuck this demon. And then it gets to that amazing wide shot where they're inside this huge cave and there's a pool of water. And they're falling down, and it's such a wide shot. And there's the flames of the demon's body is glowing. And it's just... And there's the choir singing. And it's just this unbelievably epic moment, which will become synonymous with the Return of the King, where these incredibly epic shots paired with the choirs just brings about this amazing feeling and this incredible moment.
I honestly think that's my favorite shot in the entire franchise.
It's my second favorite shot.
When they're just falling down that dark cavern, and again, like you said, super wide, and everything just slowly illuminates from the fire off of Balrog's body.
Yeah. And then it cuts, and then they're fighting atop that mountain, which is the highest peak in all of Middle Earth, and then Gandalf, like a badass, just fucking slays this guy with his sword.
This old man with a sword.
Well, what they don't explain in the movies is that beings like Gandalf and like Aragorn, they're actually much stronger than humans are. They don't say it, but like that's why they're able to fight all these guys no problem, because they're actually extremely powerful physically. And so he fucks this guy up, kills him, and then we see that he's just lying on the edge of the cliff, and then it cuts to back to the story.
So I love the opening. It's a great way to get this going. It's like right away, this is going to be an epic movie.
Yeah, because like the first one, it's a little slow for the first act, so bringing us right into some action is what gets the audience invested in, okay, I'm ready for this movie. And so the next story begins, and like the last film ended, the Fellowship has been split up into 3 parties.
And so we're off with Samwise and Frodo on their journey separately, where they've just... Even though they know they've been split up, they know that they can't go back to regroup. They have to go on with their journey and their quest to find Mordor and to find Mount Doom.
But things aren't going so well. They're actually lost, and they're walking in circles. So they don't know which way to go, because everything where they are, this environment, everything looks the same.
Mm-hmm. And then here comes Gollum, where they don't see him at first. It's they smell him. Sam is like, you smell that? That stench smells like a bug or something like that.
Yeah.
And then
he must smell real bad.
And then Frodo tells him, I don't think it's a bug.
We aren't alone. No, he says, we aren't alone.
Yeah, and then they start talking about
because Frodo knows, because Gandalf told him about Gollum when they saw him in the mines.
Yeah, and so Gollum tries to attack them to get the ring back, which then obviously they overpower him and threaten his life with their swords. Yeah. But then Frodo persuades Gollum to lead them to Black Gate of Mordor.
Yeah, so Gollum becomes their guide, which is what they needed.
Yeah. And then back in Rohan, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are in pursuit of the Iroquois.
They've been running for like 4 days straight.
Dude, I run for a minute and I'm dying. Like, how did they run so long? I mean, I get Aragorn and Legolas, but Gimli running like all this time?
Not a drop of sweat on them.
They don't even take a break. I don't see a red face anywhere.
How is their hair not sopping wet with sweat?
Seriously. And they're wearing all that gear. Gimli's wearing a goddamn helmet.
No food?
No water? They're just going nonstop. Like, are they all track stars? I had no idea. They weren't running before this.
But they explain that there's like dark evil and dark magic behind the orcs, which is why they're able to keep moving so fast. Endlessly. But yeah, it's pretty funny. And this is where we run into the Rohan warriors, and we meet badass Karl Urban for the first time.
Karl Urban's so cool in this movie. He really is. He's badass. He's the man.
He's like the Aragorn of Rohan.
And then he's the son of King Theoden.
Yeah.
Who is the king of Rohan. And we also learn that he's been basically possessed or under a trance of Saruman, thanks to Grima Wormtongue, who is secretly, obviously, in the service of Saruman.
Yeah.
And so Saruman has just control over King Theoden, and Theoden has just been emaciated to just old man, like he's been Benjamin Buttoned in reverse. He's just like super old and withering away, and he's bringing the kingdom down through him.
In the meeting with the Rohan warriors, Karl Urban gives the trio a pair of horses, and they use these horses to travel across the landscape, and they enter the woods, which is when they run into the White Wizard.
Yeah, and they think it's Saruman.
So the way that Peter Jackson filmed it was he actually filmed both Ian McKellen and Christopher Lee in this shot, and he also used Christopher Lee's voice for some of the dialogue, because the way it's shot is this wizard is backlit with this incredibly bright light, so we can't see what his face looks like, but we can hear Christopher Lee's voice, but then it kind of blends into Ian McKellen's voice, and then when Aragorn tells him to finally reveal himself, we see that it's actually Gandalf. But he's not Gandalf the Grey, he's Gandalf the White. His hair is straight and clean, his robes are white and pure, and he tells them the story about how he defeated the Balrog, and he thought it was going to be his time to die, but then he was sent back to Middle-earth
to help them on their quest, and it wasn't his time anymore.
Yeah.
It wasn't his time yet.
Yeah.
And it's an awesome reveal because you're scared. The first time you see this, you're scared for the characters because it's like, oh man, Saruman's here.
Yeah.
And even Aragorn, like, be quick. And like, they can't mess this up or else they're going to die. And then you realize it's Gandalf. You're like, Gandalf!
And it's crazy because they can't even fight Gandalf at all. Like, he destroys them, no problem.
Yeah. And Gandalf doesn't realize who he is at first, but then he remembers the name. He's like, Gandalf the Grey.
Gandalf the Grey.
That's what they used to call me.
But what's crazy about Gandalf is, it's like, what exactly happened to him? And the thing is, Gandalf is not a mortal being. He was sent down on the Middle Earth originally because he's kind of like a deity. He's kind of like an immortal being, like an angel, and essentially he's one of a few angels that were sent down to Middle Earth to help the beings of Middle Earth. And so his body, his physical form can be destroyed, but he technically can't be killed. So what happened was when his body was killed, he was sent back up into the heavens, whatever the gods of Middle Earth are, and since they deemed him still necessary to the purpose of the task at hand, they sent him back down to Earth, but they gave him like superpowers again, more superpowers. Cool. They like made him Super Saiyan.
Gandalf is Super Saiyan now. He's Gandalf the White. It's a good comparison.
Yeah.
He doesn't just have, instead of just screaming,
Yeah.
he defeats a demon.
And then during this, Merry and Pippin are hanging out with Treebeard in all those trees. It's probably the most boring part of the entire franchise.
It definitely is the most boring part. But again, it's a necessary part of the story.
Yeah, it's important.
And it's interesting CGI and great special effects.
Great CGI.
Practical and digital special effects.
Yeah, they built a 16-foot Treebeard in real life.
And then we go to Gollum is leading Frodo and Sam to Mordor. And there's this great scene, which kind of is a great moment for the characterization between Frodo and Gollum, where Frodo is enticed by the waters of these marshes, and he ends up falling in, and in the depths of the lake or the marshes are these like dead souls or ghosts that are coming to capture Frodo forever. Right before he gets taken by these ghost beings, Gollum saves Frodo, and even Frodo comes out of the water, and he's like, Gollum? He's surprised that Gollum saved him. And this is a big moment for Frodo to start building trust for Gollum. And again, it leads more to when we get to the Gates of Mordor. So talk about when we get to the Gates of Mordor.
Gollum brings, he brings Frodo and Sam to the Black Gate. And this is the first time we get to see what Sauron's, pretty much Sauron's home looks like. Mm-hmm. And
the Gates of Mordor.
Yeah, the Gates of Mordor. And they built this gate practically. It was a miniature, and then they digitally put the actors on top of the gate. But the scale of the gate, when those evil soldiers walk in, they are so tiny in comparison to the gate. This gate must be like 200, 300 feet tall. And it's so imposing and so intimidating. And then it shows like the true power of Sauron and how many resources he has at his disposal to be able to build just a gate of this size.
Seems unstoppable.
And then they have trolls that are opening it. So like they have trolls in their army that they use as servants, and it's just like unbelievable to see how strong this army can be.
And so again here, like before, so Gollum saved Frodo's life before they get here in the marshes.
So he's established this trust.
Again, he saves their lives again, where he refuses to let them go to the gates and try to sneak in because he knows they'll die. He knows they'll be killed.
And Frodo believes him because he understands that Gollum does not want the ring to get in the hands of Sauron. So clearly, Gollum truly believes that they would die if they went into the gate.
Yeah, and Gollum's trying to convince them that there's another path. It's a darker path, but there's another path to get into Mordor.
And then Sam is always suspicious. He's like, why ain't you mentioned it before? And Gollum's like, you guys told me to bring you to the Black Gate. I don't know what the fuck you wanted. I'm just doing what you asked me to do.
I'm a fucking weird thing. Like, all right, I'm not that smart. But but Frodo says this great line where he says he's been true to his word, which shows a lot of character development between Frodo and Gollum. And now Frodo is starting to trust Gollum. This is twice now that he's technically saved his life. He's beginning to feel empathy for him. He also has scenes where he talks about Gollum and says that he wasn't much different than a hobbit himself, being one of the lake folk. So Frodo is starting to build a relationship with Gollum, as odd as that sounds.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when Samwise looks at Gollum, he sees this disgusting creature you can't trust. It's maniacal. He's treacherous. He just wants to kill him, and he wants to take the ring for himself. But when Frodo looks at Gollum, he understands what the ring did to this being because he's dealing with it himself. He understands how the ring can corrupt your mind and destroy your soul. So he empathizes with him because he's experiencing that right now.
Yeah, he's empathizing with Sméagol.
Yeah.
So now Frodo is developing this relationship with the Sméagol side of Gollum, and whereas Samwise only sees Gollum.
Yeah.
And this will lead to more issues later on.
Yeah. And so Gollum starts taking them on this new journey, and then we cut to the trio with Gandalf show up at Rohan, which is an incredible real set that the crew built just for these scenes, built atop this small mountain. And like we said before, the tangibility of the set really adds to the realism of the film.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I love the way they enter the castle where they have to take their swords and their weapons away, and then Gandalf pretends like he's like, you wouldn't part an old man of his walking stick, would you?
And the guy's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, whatever, you can come on in. And this is where we see Gandalf free Theoden from Saruman's control.
Yeah.
But Saruman doesn't know that he's the White Wizard yet.
Yeah.
He thinks he's still Gandalf the Grey, which means he's basically like a lower class of wizard.
Yeah.
If there's a hierarchy, he's like level 2 now.
Second tier.
Yeah, so he's not as powerful as the White Wizard like Saruman. He hasn't evolved yet. He hasn't taken the evolution
Third
stone
evolution.
yet. Yeah. And so this is where he confronts Theoden, and he tells the Wormtongue to put his tongue behind his teeth. And then obviously, he takes off his robe after Saruman says, you have no power here, Gandalf the Grey, and reveals his power now, and Saruman's taken aback. And Gandalf releases Theoden of the spell that has been cast on Saruman. And it's a great digital effect sequence where you show, there's just this one shot with Theoden and his daughters looking at him, where it's just like this dissolve basically of him being old to young real fast, and it's a great effect, and it still holds up to today.
Yeah, he de-ages by like 40 years in a couple of seconds, and it looks good. Theoden is a great king and an honorable man, and we immediately like him. But he's also dealing with the death of his son, so he instantly mourns that loss, and he says that line, a parent shouldn't have to bury their child, which is extremely touching, and it's a very emotional scene.
And then we're also introduced a little before then to his daughter Eowyn, who plays a significant role throughout the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Because she, falls in love with Aragorn eventually.
Yeah.
And he's like, yo, I got a girl.
She's like, who gave you that necklace? She's like, back off, girl.
Like, oh, baby mama.
You know, Liv Tyler, I'm hitting that.
I got an elf lady. You ever been with an elf? It's wild.
She's thousands of years old. She's done so much shit you don't even believe.
Theoden gets control of his kingdom and banishes Wormtongue. But also, this is what leads to the climax of the film, where Theoden thinks the best decision as king is to have his people go flee to Helm's Deep in the keep to prevent being killed and overrun by the Uruk-hai.
Yeah, Aragorn believes that they should stand up and fight, but Theoden's doing what he thinks is best for his people, so they leave.
Yeah, I understand he's trying to protect his people.
Yeah.
He doesn't want anyone to die. And he thinks Helm's Deep is impenetrable.
Yeah.
So he thinks it's the right decision.
Yeah. While this is happening, Frodo and Sam are captured by Faramir, Boromir's younger brother. And then...
This is a very important sequence.
This is probably the most important sequence between Frodo and Gollum because Boromir convinces Frodo to betray Gollum. And so Frodo tricks Gollum into getting captured by them as well. And this betrayal of trust has heavy consequences down the line.
Because now Gollum's going to basically take control over the being, because Smeagol's basically been in the driver's seat now.
Yeah.
Because he's had this great relationship with his master.
He's happy to serve his master now.
Yeah. And so him and Frodo have this great relationship going on, which has given him the strength to keep Gollum down. But now it's all about the change.
And there's that great scene, before this happens, there's this great scene where we get to see the two personalities arguing with each other, Smeagol and Gollum. And it's an amazing it's amazing look at how Gollum's mind works and how part of him is innocent, part of him is still good. It's still in there. But the ring created this other facet to him that has completely dominated the true side of him. So the Rohan nation is fleeing on foot and by horseback, traveling to Helm. He kills the beast that attacked him, but it falls on top of him and it's smothering him. And he's like, oh, it's like, oh fuck! And then an orc jumps on top of him and he kills the orc. And
he snaps its neck.
He snaps its neck, and the orc falls on top of him. He's like, oh no! And then another monstrous beast climbs on top of him, and then Aragorn kills it, saving him just in time. But then that falls on top of him too. So he's being smothered by these three giant bodies.
But this battle, although they defeat them, they do lose men, and they lose, most importantly, Aragorn falls off a cliff because he gets stuck onto one of those hyena things.
Yeah, his hand gets stuck in a strap.
Yeah, and it falls, and he falls and tumbles down the cliffside into a river.
Great shot, because Peter Jackson doesn't follow him. He just holds the camera. Aragorn falls off the cliff, and then it's just quiet. It's a tragic moment because we think Aragorn's dead, and he's been probably and he's been an important figure for the film. Faramir takes Frodo, Gollum, and Sam into a city, which is being attacked by orcs
and ring wraiths.
And this is where Frodo encounters a wraith on rings, where it's on this gigantic dragon-like serpent monster. And there's this incredible moment where he walks to the ledge of this building, and he's tempted to just put the ring on in front of the wraith, and it's in slow motion. And
Such a cool shot.
Great shot. But then Samwise grabs him at the last second, and they fall down those steps. But when we get to see, this is the first moment we get to see the effect that the ring is having on Frodo, because after Sam saves him, Frodo pulls out his sword and holds it to his throat like he's about to kill him. And it takes Frodo several moments to realize that it's just Sam. So we can see how the ring is corrupting his mind.
All right, anyways, but also next up what's happening is we're back with Merry and Pippin in Fangorn Forest. We got to touch on the Treebeard people. Yeah. And Merry and Pippin are trying to convince the Treebeards and other Ents to hold a council to decide on whether the Ents will go to war with Saruman. And the Ents eventually tell them that it's not their fight. The hobbits should go home. And they basically lose hope until so Pippin wants to show the Ents what Saruman has done with Isengard to the land and how much destruction he's had on the earth and with other trees. And basically it's a really smart move because it convinces the Ents to go to war and reclaim Isengard and destroy what's going on there and all the destruction that they've created.
They messed that place up.
Yeah, man. And that's where they're building, like, they're creating orcs and stuff.
Yeah, that's where Saruman's been building his army. And he destroyed most of the forest in order to do so. And it's a great scene where the Ents just take over that entire land and dominate all the orcs, and they destroy everything they've built. And then they break the dam and flood the entire place out.
Yeah, I love the shots where some of them, their heads are on fire, and they just duck it inside the water.
Yeah. It's a great scene. And then Saruman's up on his tower, like, freaking out, like, what the fuck is going on?
And meanwhile, also our homeboy Aragorn is not dead. Washes up on shore, nudged awake by his horse Brego.
Fun fact, he actually bought the horse after production.
I bet they were best buds.
Yeah.
On the verge of collapse, he wills his horse to take him to Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
Which is the most epic battle ever, man.
And so he gets there, and what he discovers is there isn't much of an army there to defend. Most of what Rohan has left are farmers and old men and young boys. And so they're building this, they're preparing for a battle that they can't win. And Legolas can see this clearly. They have a fight, him and Aragorn, where Legolas says it's hopeless. Like, most of these people are either too old or too young. They've never even seen battle. But Aragorn, being as honorable as he always is, it's like, I don't care. I'm going to still fight with them, and I'll die as one of them.
It's telling because they have the conversation in Elvish so that Legolas or Aragorn, they don't want the men to hear what they're actually talking about.
Yeah.
And then Aragorn says the last line, "Now I shall die as one of them," in English, so that they all understand and the conversation they just had, and how emotional it really is for the two of them, even Gimli too, because he's part of the trio.
Yeah.
And the Battle of Helm's Deep is, it's so badass, and I've never seen anything like it, really. The first time I saw this.
Well, what makes it so great is it's all real. They really built Helm's Deep. They really built everything. They really blew it up. Everything's tangible in person.
And then you see the numbers of the orcs and the Orcai, and it's just terrifying.
They're approaching, and it's pouring rain.
Yeah.
And then you can just hear their screams and their horns.
And then fortunately the men, they get support from the elves come, so they bring some archers and everything.
Yeah.
But still, they're vastly outnumbered.
Yeah.
And
the Battle of Helm's Deep took 4 months to shoot.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
I believe it.
3 months of it was night shoots.
Looks complicated.
Yeah. And then, so the set itself, yes, they built it, but it wasn't exactly to scale to what Helm's Deep would have been in real life, because obviously they couldn't afford to build a giant set like that. So what they did is they did the same thing they did the same forced perspective they used to film the hobbits with normal sized people. They used forced perspective in the architecture. So Peter Jackson would film, say, a part of Helm's Deep, and then the background, that part of the architecture of the set was actually slowly, it was built to force perspective, so it got smaller and smaller. So on camera, it looks like it's a far distance when actually it's much smaller than you think. So they use force perspective to make the entire set look bigger.
Stakes for this battle are enormous, but it starts off pretty simple. You know, a bunch of arrows going off and stuff like that. And the orcs are using ladders and whatnot, but they can't get a bunch of men over the walls of the tower. And Theoden even goes, "Is this all you can muster, Sauron?"
Yeah, literally right after he says that.
And then obviously they don't realize that they have some explosives, which they hinted to earlier in the film when Saruman has like this pot full of gunpowder, and Wormtongue looks at it like kind of weird because he had a flame. And then Saruman's like bashed the flame away.
He's like, get it away.
He's like, what is that stuff? And so they blow up the freaking wall, which they didn't think possible. And the look on Theoden's face is just like, oh my fucking god.
Holy shit,
we're all dead.
And then the orcs just erupt in there, and Aragorn gets in there, and it's just an all-out war.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And then later on, after more battling, they have those crazy ladders that they use that like have like a ton of orcs on traveling up them. But Legolas shoots one down, which is pretty badass. But they're overrunning Helm's Deep, and they're taking over. And
it seems like all is lost already.
Yeah, all is lost
very quickly.
They're breaching the front door, too. And for some reason, Theoden's got to go down there and help, and he gets stabbed.
Like this old dude, like, come on.
Like, who are you helping, bro? Just go, like, hang out in the corner. But then there's this great scene where Gimli and Aragorn, they're trying to sneak around the side of the castle of Helm's Deep to like
they have to clear out the bridge,
to try to clear out the bridge, and then Gimli thinks he can jump it, then Aragorn's like, it's a long way. But then Gimli's like, toss me
don't tell the elf.
And he tosses him. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah, it's great.
And then they take over the front of Helm's
they
Deep,
clear it up
entrance,
so that they're able to board up the door again.
And then obviously they're losing the battle. However, there's hope, because earlier in the film Gandalf hints at Aragorn and the trio, hints at them to look east.
On the 5th day at dawn, at first light, look east.
Exactly. Took the words out of my mouth. And then Carl Urban and his homies come.
They show up.
They save the day. It's awesome.
It's an amazing moment when because Aragorn leads the small cat. There's like 10 people left. Him, Theoden, and a few other guys, and they literally just ride out on their horses. And there's this gigantic army of thousands and thousands of orcs. And then they look up, and Gandalf's chilling on the top of that mountain on his horse, like, what's up? And then everyone else, and then the Rohan armies just starts pouring down that hill.
Yeah, that charge sequence.
Amazing sequence. And what's really cool is, in order to keep the horses from getting harmed, all of the spears were made out of cardboard.
That's pretty smart. And then they charge the army, and then the sunlight shines right above them, and it blinds the orc eye and the orc, and they just boom, bash right into this army, and they save the day.
Yeah, they mess those guys up. It's a great moment. And then we see this is a moment where we see, if the forces of Middle Earth work together, they can defeat this enemy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Because it's constantly that back and forth of like, Rohan doesn't want to get help from Gondor because where was Gondor before when they needed help?
Yeah.
And so they all kind of like have bitter feelings towards each other.
Yeah.
When really if they work together, they can stop the army.
Exactly. And so the battle's over, but just as Gandalf says, it's only just beginning.
And then we're going to go back to Frodo and Gollum because here's a very important development. This is where...
Well, first, Faramir sets them free.
Okay.
He understands the importance of their quest, and he lets them go.
And then also Gollum, he's with them. However, since he's been betrayed by Frodo when he delivered him to Foromir's men, the darker side of Gollum starts to take over again and reemerges and decides to reclaim the ring by secretly leading Frodo and Sam to a creature he refers to only as her, which Gollum's lighter self reluctantly agrees to.
But not reluctantly, because he ends up saying yes.
He's a little scared at first, though.
But then he eventually gets into total agreement with Gollum that they have to kill them.
Yeah, so Gollum corrupts Smeagol again.
Yeah.
And then Gollum leads the hobbits on through the woods as Mordor is seen in the distance.
Yeah. What a great shot.
Yeah, it's a pretty great shot.
Some fun facts for this movie. The digital rendering of Gollum took 6 hours for every shot. And so Weta, the artists at Weta had to finish a shot, and then they would render it all night and then wake up in the morning and check on it in the morning.
Imagine if they fuck up.
They did a lot. Sometimes they would mess up, and Gollum's eyes would be out of his head, and his hair would be all standing up straight. Like, all weird shit would happen, so it wasn't always perfect because the technology was so early back then.
That was in its infancy.
Probably most of the Rohan riders were actually women, and they glued beards onto them to make them appear as though they were men.
No way.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's probably because there are more female equestrians out there.
They were there, and they were actually the best riders of all the crew. All right, let's move on to Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the conclusion to this epic trilogy.
Amazing story, amazing film franchise with an amazing, satisfying ending, making this trilogy live on forever.
For me, this is my favorite Lord of the Rings film.
I think it's regarded as the best of them all.
Yeah.
This one was a big-time Oscar winner, took down a ton of awards.
It won 11 out of 11 Oscars.
Insane.
Cleaned up.
Which is nuts to think of a fantasy film doing that.
Yeah, like we said, the Academy has never been very generous to fantasy before this. But let's get right into it. This film opens up like the other two with a scene from the past. We get to learn Gollum's history. And we get to see Andy Serkis in live action.
As Smeagol before he becomes corrupted by the ring.
Yeah, and like we learn, as Gandalf said, he was once like a hobbit. He seemed to be a good-natured, innocent kind of guy. And then on a picnic with his buddy, they happened upon the ring, the One Ring. And Smeagol is the kind of person the ring had an immediate effect on and turned him instantly into a killer. Because him and his buddy start as like a small argument over who the ring belongs to.
And Smeagol, it's his birthday, so he's like, it's my birthday, I should get the ring.
Yeah, just give it to me as a gift. And then the other one, his friend doesn't want to give it up, and then it turns into a bloody battle where Smeagol chokes his friend to death. And then he chokes his friend, and then he becomes so ecstatic and happy because he has the ring to himself.
When I see that shot of after he kills his friend, after he chokes him to death, and then he has the ring, in my mind, I'm like, his humanity is 100% gone.
Yeah.
He's not even going to go back to his home, even if he has family, even if he has kids.
Yeah.
He's not going back.
Yeah.
The ring is now his entire life.
Exactly.
And Andy Serkis, it's great to see him not like as Gollum CGI and to see the actor in real life playing it, because you can see how talented the guy is and how he embodies both Smeagol and Gollum so well.
Absolutely. And then we see over the next few centuries how the ring keeps Smeagol alive, but also deteriorates his mind, his soul, and his body.
Yeah.
And we slowly see him transition into the final form of Gollum.
He's withering away. His hair's thinning. He's
Yeah.
getting weirder gray. His skin's turning
just
gray.
getting disgusting.
And then there's that close-up shot of him and his teeth just biting like a raw fish.
Yeah, it's nasty. A cool fact about Andy Serkis' performance is the way he portrayed Gollum, especially in terms of his desperate need for the ring and his craving for the ring. He actually based it upon heroin withdrawals. So he used withdrawal from a serious drug like heroin as a way to tap into the character's personality.
Obviously worked out.
Yeah.
It's probably the same exact effect.
Yeah.
And so after we have this great sequence of the past and then Smeagol turning into Gollum, we go and see Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, present day in the story, approaching the mountains of Mordor and with Mount Doom in view. And this is very important because in this scene, we see that Sam has bad feelings about Gollum being there, and him and Frodo have like their own little personal conversations. But Frodo, however, still has complete trust in the creature, and Gollum is putting on a great show for Frodo, acting as Smeagol.
Yeah.
And it's really effective into keeping his trust, which will obviously lead to demise later on.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. So Gandalf and the others make it to Isengard, where they run into Merry and Pippin, who are smoking up like it's nobody's business.
Smoking those joints, they conquered Isengard. They're like, "What up, players?"
They're ripping bowls all day.
High as a fucking kite.
And a nice little comic relief to get us into the film. And this is Saruman finally meets his end. Gandalf kills him and causes him to fall off the ledge of his high tower. And then with Saruman falls the orb, in which he has been using to peer upon everyone throughout Middle-earth. Pippin catches a hint of the orb, but Gandalf quickly gathers it and hides it from view. But he's curious. So curious that in the next scene, when everyone's sleeping, Pippin decides to go see the orb for himself. And there's this funny moment where he takes it from Gandalf while he's sleeping.
It's like Indiana Jones almost.
Indiana Jones. And then he takes the cloth off the orb, and immediately Sauron takes over and sees Pippin. But also Pippin sees the future, and he sees that Sauron's plan is to attack Minas Tirith as a all-out attack on mankind. And then once he tells this to the gang, this is what leads them to journey to Minas Tirith to stop it from happening. So this sets the events into play for this film. But while this is happening, we go back to Frodo and Sam and Gollum, and this is where Gollum really begins manipulating them, because they reach those steps. There's like those gigantic, like huge steps, and while they're climbing them, they watch as the Witch King erupts out of that glowing green building with his army, and he's like the ultimate ring wraith or something. He's just a monster. And they see the size of this new army, and it's intimidating and terrifying, and then the army takes off. And then these three go back up the steps. But what happens is, during one of their nights of rest, Gollum takes all of their lambs and bread.
Lamb's the bread. I'm
just going to say bread. Gollum takes all their bread, throws it over the ledge, and then sprinkles the crumbs on Sam. And then, by waking up Frodo and Sam, they realize that there's no food left, there's no bread left. And obviously, all signs to point to Sam, because he's covered in breadcrumbs. And this betrayal causes Frodo to believe that Sam has become selfish, wants the ring for himself, and shouldn't journey with them anymore.
Yeah, so this is where Frodo betrays Sam, tells him to go home. says he doesn't need him anymore.
Yeah.
And he has more trust and faith in Gollum than he does in Sam, his best friend.
Yeah, he chooses Gollum over him.
Which, at this point, Frodo's mental health is just deteriorating because of the ring. So he doesn't even know it. He's kind of just corrupt himself.
Yeah.
He's beginning to become corrupt.
He's not making a good choice because he's not himself. But even so, Sam does, since Sam is as loyal as can be, so he just does what Frodo says and he leaves.
And now we're going to get to see the first time like Merry and Pippin get split up, because these two have been inseparable like their whole lives, and they're like best buds. They're almost like brothers. And so now Gandalf is going to take Pippin to Minas Tirith, which is the capital city of Gondor. This is where he saw the white tree burning. And obviously they have to go and see what's going on. And this is the kingdom that Aragorn really has the rightful heir to. Yeah, he should be king there.
Yeah.
But
right now there's a steward in place.
Yeah, and the steward is also corrupt, and he's also evil.
Yeah. And so when that's happening, Gollum leads Frodo to Shelob, the giant spider, and he leads him into that cave where all the spider webs are.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It's horrifying. And then Frodo is trying to walk through, and he just starts getting caught in all the webs. And you can hear Gollum just taunting him from the distance. His voice is echoing through. And then Frodo actually manages to escape the cave, and we think he's out. But then out of nowhere, this giant spider just fucking stabs him, paralyzing him, and then starts wrapping him in spider webs.
While Frodo's being attacked by Shelob and trying to escape from her, Sam's also on his way back to him. Yeah. Because he's not going to give up on Frodo. Again, we've reiterated this multiple times. Sam is so important to the story because he doesn't let Frodo give up, and he doesn't give up on Frodo. And so he's going to come back and try to save him. Yeah. And Frodo does a pretty good job trying to defend himself against this giant spider, but holy crap, it's terrifying. Yeah. And when he gets caught by Shelob and she spins him around in that web, I was shitting my fucking pants, dude.
She wraps him into a cocoon. But then, guess who shows up? Samwise shows up with his glowing sword stinger.
He saves the day. And then it's a great fight between him and the spider. Yeah. And I don't know why these people can't kill these fucking hobbits, dude. I feel like I could beat the crap out of a hobbit.
A hobbit's just like a little kid. You just fucking beat the shit out of him.
Kick him in the face. Yeah. And this giant spider can't get him.
Yeah.
But something about them, they're too small to catch. They're very slippery, these hobbits. And somehow Sam stabs this spider in the face and messes it up, and it runs away.
Some of the shots of just a close-up of Sam holding the sword are actually Peter Jackson holding the sword.
Really?
Yeah, they just didn't have him on set, Sean Astin, so he did it instead.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
And so Sam saves Frodo and tries to bring him back to life, but also at the same time we're cutting back to Gondor at Minas Tirith, where Gandalf and Pippin have gone to see the steward, and Pippin has devoted himself now to the steward because he is Boromir's father, and when he learns of Boromir's death, he is distraught. Yeah. And so Pippin pledges his allegiance to him and becomes basically like a knight or something for that steward.
But Denethor is clearly fucking losing it. He's become irrational and delusional and dangerous.
And he sends his second son, played by Carl Urban, basically to slaughter.
Well, he doesn't send him, but he says that he wished it was him that died rather than Boromir, which causes Faramir to be like, I need to prove myself to my father. So he pretty much goes on a suicide mission with his corpse, with his cavalry, to go try and conquer that city back again.
At the same time, the capital city is being attacked by these enormous army.
So Gandalf convinces Pippin to light the signal fires, which would send a call to aid to Rohan. He manages to climb up there, and he lights the fire, and then we see that cool sequence of flame being lit from mountain to mountaintop all the way to Rohan. And then back at Rohan, when the final flame is lit, Aragorn's like, yo, they called for aid, let's go get them! And then Gandalf and Merry, Gandalf and Merry, they stop Denethor from killing Faramir, and then Denethor jumps off the ledge of the city because he's fucking crazy now. Sauron's army is destroying Minas Tirith and really taking it to task. Then the army of Rohan shows up behind them, and they start charging, and then we see the huge battle of the Fields of Pelennor, where the cavalry of Rohan are going up against this giant evil army where they have these huge elephants and crazy creatures, and it's an amazing sequence. The wraiths get involved, and the dragons, it's nuts. And so before the battle in the Fields of Pelennor, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas split up from the soldiers of Rohan to head into the caverns of the dead man's lair in order to reclaim his birthright.
And this is where he convinces that dead army to fight for him, which is a pretty scary sequence because these like terrifying green ghosts.
Yeah.
And
what happened was Elrond brought Isildur's sword, repaired it, and brought it to Aragorn. So now he is the true claim as the heir to Gondor.
Yeah, and then the army becomes loyal to Aragorn, the rightful king.
Yeah, because of the sword.
And then they show up with all those ghosts, like when they're on the ship.
Yeah. So in the Fields of Pelennor, while the battle is raging on, Aragorn shows up with his ghost army,
and they just tear the orc and the other armies apart. Man, they just go to town. And you just see all these ghosts just like all floating through the city, killing people and everything, and they don't even stand a chance, and they just fuck them all up.
It's like we didn't even have to fight.
Yeah, they could have just got the dead army to begin with. That's all they had to do.
Sam saves Frodo from the orcs who took him. And they head out and they set out on foot for Mordor. So while they're entering Mordor, they see that the army is gigantic and they're all over the land. Like there's no way they can make it to the volcano without being seen. But while that's happening, Aragorn says to the armies like, "Let's go to the Black Gate and make a last stand." So
to give Frodo time.
Yeah. So all the armies of men gather together. And they lay siege to the Black Gate, so they approach the Black Gate. This causes Sauron to take his entire body of forces and send it out after the army of men. Because he's like, this is everyone that's left in mankind. I can fuck these guys up and end this for once and for all. So he sends everyone out after them.
And also, it takes all his attention to the front gates, away from everything else happening.
So it empties out Mordor and takes the gaze of Sauron's eye off of searching for Frodo and onto the battle that ensues.
And this is an epic battle because they're clearly outnumbered.
Yeah.
And they just have this small circle army of fighters left. And they're going to fight to the end. And even there's that great scene where Aragorn just like, he seems to become at peace with death. Yeah. And he's just like...
He gives that great speech.
He's like, let's do it, man. Here we go. And then it's like, he just leads the charge.
He just runs after this giant army by himself.
And even Merry and Pippin are like, ah!
Yeah, they're like the next two that show up.
And now we're dealing with, inside Mordor, Sam and Frodo is exhausted. And he can't walk anymore because this journey's just taking so much out of him. And so, Sam ends up having to lift him up to carry him up the hill, up the mountain. I can't carry it
for you, but I can carry you.
Yeah, it's a great moment, and he carries him up the mountain.
Yeah, very heroic moment.
Up Mount Doom.
As they're going up, guess who shows up?
Gollum's back.
He's not done, so he starts attacking them. And then there's this fight between the three of them. Gollum's he's messing them up. He's like throwing rocks off their faces and pounded into them.
Yeah.
But Frodo manages to get away, and he has this last burst of energy, and he manages to jump up and run into the volcano. And then Sam subdues Gollum and follows Frodo inside.
And now we have Frodo. This whole journey's taken him here. He's finally made it to Mount Doom. He's inside the volcano, the only place that the ring can be destroyed. And this is where he finally becomes corrupted by the ring. He can't do it. Sam's yelling at him to drop it into the lava, but he can't do it, and he decides to put the ring on.
Yeah.
And just this evil face just comes on Frodo.
Yeah, he just has that smirk.
Yeah.
And he says, the ring is mine now.
And when he puts the ring on, and he goes invisible, and like the music goes, and
You're
Sam
like, no!
screams, and he's like, the world's over!
No!
They're not going to do it!
And then, so the thing is with this is, it begs the question, like, did Frodo really carry out the task? And why did he? If Gandalf said that he could do it, and if Galadriel said that he's the one who can do it, why is it that when Frodo came to the last moment, he decided not to destroy the ring?
I think that the ring itself, no one could fully perform the task.
I think that's right. I think that Frodo was the only one who had the ability to bring it that far. But even in the end, the ring is so powerful, but that nobody could eventually turn it down completely.
Yeah, I think any possessor of the ring will not lead to its destruction, which is a perfect example of how it becomes destroyed, is where Gollum, he knows he's invisible, so he finds him, tracks him down, and bites the ring off his finger.
Yeah.
And Gollum will fall holding his precious into the lava, not knowing that it's going to destroy the ring, despite that happening, because he doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
But I think any being that possesses the ring won't have the power, no matter how good they are, to drop it into the lava.
Yeah, I think it's one thing for a character to never hold the ring to be able to turn it down, but then to have the ring and possess it, I don't think it's possible to destroy it, because Bilbo doesn't destroy it when he gives it to Frodo. He just passes it on, but Frodo has to destroy it, and I think every person would be incapable of actually destroying the ring.
Yeah.
So I think that's why as well.
Yeah. I think we're probably right.
Yeah. Must be.
Yeah. I mean, what else would it be?
Yeah.
Someone has probably some other theory.
But then, Gollum gets the ring, and then he falls down the cliff, and then he lands into the lava, and he's like, oh, what's happening? And he quickly, like, melts into it. And then the ring just, the lava underneath it turns to stone and ash, and then it solidifies, and then eventually the ring just completely melts into the lava.
And then the volcano erupts.
Yeah.
Explodes, kid.
Yeah. And then the armies see it explode, and then Sauron's armies start panicking because the earth beneath them starts collapsing, and they start falling into the earth, and then the ones who survive start running away. And then Sam pulls Frodo up in this gross bloody hand, missing a finger. And then they escape the volcano.
And then they get saved by the eagles.
Which leads to probably the biggest qualm people have with the movie is the eagles. And people are like, why didn't they just use the eagles in the beginning? And the reason why they didn't use the eagles in the beginning is because Sauron's eye would have seen them immediately, and they would have ended like before they knew it. They would have died immediately. So they couldn't use the eagles at all.
Good point, sir.
Yeah.
Good point.
If Sauron would have seen them, no problem. He would have been like, hey, there's a bunch of eagles flying here. Can you guys take them out?
Yeah. So they did it. They destroyed the ring.
Yeah.
With the help of Gollum, unbeknownst to him. And then freaking Aragorn becomes king of Gondor, becomes king, marries that amazing crown ceremony, and he marries his elf bride.
Yeah. And then the hobbits return to the Shire. It's like another 65 minutes.
Yeah, you think the movie's over, but yeah, we could do a whole podcast on what's left. We really could. Like, there's some weird scenes going on after this.
That slow motion when Frodo wakes up in the bed, and it's like slow motion. It's very bright, soft light, and everyone's like so happy. It's very cringy.
It's very suggestive.
They're like, ha ha ha. And then when Sam walks into the room,
oh my god,
and Frodo and Sam just give each other that look like, oh yeah, baby.
There's something going on.
Let's get it on.
There's something going on between these two. You can tell.
The looks they give each other in this movie.
It's very romantic. And then they're back at the Shire.
Yeah.
And
Sam gets married.
Sam asks that girl out.
Rosie.
They get married. And everything's back to normal.
And then Frodo leaves with the elves to go live his life, and he's like, fuck the hobbits. Peter Jackson actually filmed one last shot 4 months after the film came out, and 3 weeks after the film won Best Picture. It's a shot of skulls on the floor that he wanted to get so badly that he filmed it after the movie already won Best Picture. And they put it in the DVD extended. They put it in the extended DVD version.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so it's like this funny thing where they were filming one last scene, even though the movie won the Oscar.
Never finished it.
And then for the giant armies at the final battle outside of Mordor, they actually hired a lot of the New Zealand army to play the orcs and the men.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, are we done?
We're done.
Holy
That's
crap!
the trilogy.
I am exhausted. This took a lot out of me, man. It's like 11 o'clock.
It's dense.
I'm rocked right now. That
a lot goes on in these movies.
That was an exhausting episode. Holy shit. Overall, one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Yeah. Amazing characters, amazing directing. Yeah. Obviously deserves all the acclaim and awards it got. And, you know, this film series will live on forever. Obviously, no one gives a crap about The Hobbit like they shouldn't. Lord of the Rings is the real gem of this Middle-earth world.
Yeah. They are some of my favorite movies to watch. It's one of the greatest stories ever told. And it will always stand the test of time. And I look forward to seeing what Amazon does with it with the prequel series. I'm pretty curious about that. But otherwise, this trilogy is the top of the top in filmmaking and storytelling.
Yeah. Expertly made. All right, that's the end of episode 18.
Thanks for listening.
Oh my God, thank God, I'm exhausted. Stay tuned. We went and took a road trip to San Diego to see Tenet on Saturday because San Diego County is the only county opening up movie theaters in Southern California. So we drove 2 hours to go see it. Check out our little video. We did a before and after reaction.
It's a lot of fun.
We're going to do a review on Tenet coming up. So if you haven't seen it, don't watch that or listen to it if you're going to see it. But if you have seen it or want to hear about it, check it out.
You'll like what we have to say.
But we're going to be spoiling the fucking movie big time.
Yeah.
But we're very excited to talk about it. And you guys definitely got to see it as soon as you can. And it's freaking awesome.
Hell yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Peace.